And these are something that have skyrocketed in price, in value in the last 20 or 30 years. Hey, it's Don. Today we're going to look at something that I picked up just the other day. We're going to shoot these out here. In fact, let me just show you. I've got quite a few of these. And these are something that have skyrocketed in price, in value in the last 20 or 30 years. Let me get one out to show you here. I picked up a bunch of these. I've got a whole stack of the same basic things here right now. And this is an unformed Pepsi can from the 60s, an original one too. It's in very fine condition. Now, a couple of them have some issues, but I've got a stack of them. It's been a long time since I ran into these. The last time that I ran into one of these, they were only selling for 30 or 40 bucks. They haven't shown up in several years on eBay. The Pepsi ones here specifically. I've run into, I don't know, a couple dozen different brands of them. Coke ones, newer ones mostly than these. These date to the mid-60s. Steel-sided, you can see the back here. So again, this is just a tin can that was never made into a tin can. And that's all it is. These are skyrocketing now. You'll see some in just a few minutes here that used to sell for 50 to 75 that are now selling for over 300 a piece. My guesstimates would be these could easily sell in the $250 to $300 range a piece. And I've got a nice little stack of them. Several $1,000s here. Now, I didn't pay much for these. Person who had them had no clue what they even were. They were sitting in a box with rust on them. That's just something you'll have to look out for. You're going to see some rust on some of these as well. Even with the rust, these don't show up much these days at all. If you look on eBay now versus what it used to be like 10 years ago when these were out there, there's so few of them that are showing up that the prices of those have skyrocketed. Now, those came in sheets, big, huge rolls of them, which I've seen before. We've had one Pepsi one quite some time ago. It's been a very long time. Those sheets now at high-end sales can sell for $750 to $1,000 if it's the right type of can. We're going to look at just a few here, and I would recommend you checking them out on Terapeak. I'll show you what to look for as well. The big term is soda can sheet or soda can sheets. That will find you most of those that have sold on eBay if you go into Terapeak and look through Terapeak. It's something I always look for. There's a ton of money to be made in these. They're small, they're cheap. People sometimes confuse them with signage and things like that as well. But they're tin cans that were never formed. Let's hop over and look at a few examples just to give you an idea. They've made them for every brand of soda and beer that you can find. If it came in a can, chances are there were sheets available at one point. So here's just a few examples. It's the exact same thing that I showed you in the beginning here. They're just unformed cans. That's all they are. And some of these can sell for far more than a can because there's far less of these out here. The Pepsi ones I showed you in the beginning could easily be worth this kind of money, 300 plus bucks. Those are extremely scarce to find in a can, and there were far more cans produced than these sheets made out here. Now, if you go back to the 80s and 90s, these were selling for $5 and $10. Even in the 90s and the 2000 range, we only got 30 or 40 bucks for these. This Donald Duck one here as well would have only sold for the 15, 20 bucks if you went back to the 70s, 50 to say 75 back in the late 90s and early 2000 era. So the prices have steadily increased. They have never dropped on these. They have went up for the last, 50 plus years. We're actually keeping the good ones out of the lot we got ourselves to hang on to them. Just because I see the value steadily climbing, these are factory shootouts. These are things that shouldn't exist at this point. Here's just another example of just a couple common generic junk ones from Shasta Dietetic Beverage, only 6 calories. There's not a lot of Shasta collectors, and that's part of the issue, at least here in this country. It has some very awful items that they use to make this from what it looks like here, but it's not a ton of money for all of them. These came in sheets back in the day, as I said earlier. So you could get a sheet that looks like a dollar bill sheet or something like that with maybe 30 of these, 34 of these on a sheet. If you look in Terapeak, you'll be able to see many more. This is just a blow-up of one of the ones. This is by Pabst, and it's a Tapacola one here. Price-wise, it sold for a pretty decent penny, $300. I would spend a little bit of time looking through these. If you don't source in areas where you're going to find antiques, it may be hard to run into some of these, but antique flea markets are incredibly good. The antique shows and fairs that travel around the country are great. Giant antique malls, the weekend flea markets, all those are great places to find these sorts of things. We found dozens and dozens of these. I find them every single year, and we always make money on them as well. Here's just another example of a very odd one. Diabest, maybe it's a diabetic, something with low sugar or something like that. I'm not really sure, but it sells for fairly good money. Here's two at the very top of the list, the very same ones, different seller, different condition, $1,600, $1,900. Several bids on the top one here. As you can see, 16 bids. They sold 2 of them. And again, this one had 8 bids. So they're not just random ones, they're scarce. Sometimes the only example of a beer can or a soda can is one of these, and that's it. Sometimes they never made the can itself. They never produced a drink. They only ran the shots of the blanks, and the factory went under or who knows what. But there's a lot of money to be made in these when you run into them. Know what they are. They're soda can sheets is what they're described as. They're unfinished can flats, or they come actually in big sheets with multiple cans all together. Well, that's about it for today. For those who are unaware, we are moving this month. We did purchase a new house with some land and a big, huge building for our eBay business. Over 2,000 square feet will be occupied just by our business itself. So we are going to be a little disrupted in our production of videos, so please bear with us as we get the move done. But I promise you, once the move is done, we're going to be putting out a ton of new and interesting content, showing a ton of interesting things that you've probably not seen before, including many of our personal assortments of items that we've been collecting for years and years and years. But anyway, that's what I have for you today. Hopefully that gave you some ideas, some thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified if I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell all your friends.
Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. Almond Joy's got nuts, Mounds don't. Almond Joy's got real milk chocolate, coconut and munchy nuts too.